Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Tactics Board. It feels like a long time since Norwich City were last at Carrow Road, but they're back at their home stadium tomorrow when they take on Wrexham in their latest championship fixture. It feels like there's a sense of momentum going into it after a couple of good results. The performance certainly wasn't perfect at Coventry, but they picked up a point away from home against a team in very good form. Before that, it was a 2-0 win against Blackburn Rovers, but they still haven't won in front of their own fans this season. 3 losses from 3 in NR1, and they're desperate to put that right this weekend. So I'm going to take a closer look at tomorrow's game, a little bit of a look at Wrexham and their tactics, how they'll match up to Norwich, but also at the starting lineup that Norwich will have to choose and Liam Manning will have to choose. And I think it's going to be a difficult one for him and also a difficult one for me to predict, but I'll bring you that predicted starting 11 and we'll go through a couple of the options that Manning has after injuries to Matthias Quiscoren and Ben Krezene, of course, at left back. 2 positions that now need covering, whether that's direct replacements, slightly out of position, or it's a change to the formation. It'll be interesting to see which way Manning goes, but we're going to have a look at that. So without further ado, here's the team I think Manning will pick for tomorrow's game. So I've gone for Vladan Kovacevic in goal with a back 3 of Jakov Medic, Harry Darling and Jose Cordoba. Jack Stacey at right wing back, Papa Amadou Diallo at left wing back with Kenny McLean and Mirko Topic in the centre of midfield, and Emiliano Marcondes and Ante Cianats just behind Josh Sargent up front. And yes, I have gone with that back 3, so we should probably dive straight in there. I think when you look at some of the issues that Norwich have got injury-wise, it's hard to see a situation where they don't change formation. It's either that, particularly in the left-back position, or you play someone completely out of position. Kellen Fisher, I actually thought, had a really good second half against Coventry at left-back, but I always think in an attacking sense, which you feel like there probably will be more of for Norwich at home against Wrexham than there was away from home against Coventry when you're 1-0 up. I think just having a right-footed left-back in that position always makes it harder to attack and it slows down attacks, and no matter how good that fullback is, it's not natural for them to be attacking on the outside, and that just takes the threat away really, especially when you've got a winger in Diallo who wants to cut in, and you kind of have that issue where you've got both of them coming inside the pitch and it basically cuts out all width on the left hand side. So for me, it would feel more natural to go back to a back 3, back 5 type formation to deal with that. And of course, that would mean Jose Cordoba at left centre back. Of course, it wouldn't be completely different because even before Manning switched to what looked like more of a recognisable 4-4-2, they did end up looking like a back 4 relatively often, and Cordoba was out in that kind of left back position from time to time. And although I thought he looked a little bit unnatural in the channel fairly often there, Wrexham are more likely to attack through the centre of the pitch, through knockdowns from Kiefer Moore and then players running beyond him. So I don't think there will be as much threat in that position, particularly given Wrexham play wing backs, and that's probably also worth considering. And of course, we'll come on to Wrexham's approach in a little bit more detail later, but it tends to be that if you can match up a back 3 or a back 5, then it does neutralise the opposition in a tactical sense, although I'm well aware that obviously Norwich are the ones who are expected to be a little bit more positive and proactive in this game. But I think mainly for left back reasons, it's difficult to see another potential solution apart from maybe Kenny McLean going there, and I'm not sure he would necessarily love that, even though we've seen him do a decent enough job, and that maybe would open up a position for Pelle Matson or Jacob Wright, who's available for the first time after serving his 3-game suspension for a red card against Middlesbrough. So I think, yeah, Norwich have a few options, but for me the best solution in that left back position is to go to that back 3, back 4 hybrid that ends up looking more like a back 3 most of the time. As much as I think there were issues with that earlier on in the season, I feel like that's just more natural for Norwich than going with a kind of a left back out of position or a right footed full back on the left hand side. Maybe the problem there is Diallo, and do you get him high up enough in the pitch. But you have to remember his best performances probably in a Norwich shirt were his debut when he was first kind of coming onto the scene, and that was as a sort of wing back, even though he ends up playing really, really high. So I've gone for that. I suppose if you wanted to go 4-2-3-1, it would be that sort of square peg in a round hole at left back. But then pretty much for the rest of the pitch, you're okay. You'd have Diallo in a left wing position, either Ante Cianats or Mate Jurasek in a right wing position, and then Marcondes probably slots quite nicely into that number 10 position behind Josh Sargent. But I think he's actually looked okay in that slightly off-centre number 10 position, which I think I've spoken about before has been an issue for Norwich. But I think he actually suited it really well, particularly in that Portsmouth away game, which I'm aware had slightly different dimensions to what this game will do. But I think he's proven himself in that role. And to be honest, Ante Cianats looked so far off the pace against Coventry that you may as well try him in a different position. I think personally I would be strongly considering using Mate Jurasek for this game, but the fact that he hasn't even got off the bench in a championship game suggests it would be quite a lot to throw him straight into the starting 11 for Manning, so I'm not 100% he'll do that. I think there have been tactical reasons for including others. I think when he brought on Oscar Schwartau on the right-hand side, Liam Gibbs on the left-hand side against Coventry, that was about kind of bringing runners on and increasing the work rate and the energy in the team rather than expecting them to produce loads of typical quality from wide areas and good crosses and things like that. So it is kind of a different decision to maybe what it was halfway through the game at Coventry, but I just think if Jurasek hasn't even played a minute in the Championship yet this season, then it's difficult to envision Manning starting him for this one. Although for tactical reasons, it would kind of make sense and exploit a few of Wrexham's weaknesses. There are a couple of other players who you could argue could be slotted in there. I thought Javon Makama played really well against Coventry, held the ball up in an excellent way in the final third, and actually got in behind a couple of times. But for a little bit of extra quality, maybe a few more bodies around him, he could have had an assist or a goal against Coventry to finish that game off. But again, the dimensions of that game were so different to what you'd expect against Wrexham. And if you're expecting him to come in and replace Matthias Quiscoren, obviously they're completely different types of footballers, and I'd say he's actually more akin to Josh Sargent, maybe not quite at the level yet, but I think he brings many of those attributes. So for me, Makama, I would keep on the bench, maybe to bring on and try to make an impact in a more direct way later on in the game if they can't really break things down. But it will certainly be interesting to see what Manning does personnel-wise and with the formation, because I think those injuries have both come at a terrible time for Quiscoren in a personal sense, because obviously he just got off the mark in yellow and green and now he's set to miss 6 weeks. Ben Krezene out for 8 weeks, which is a decent blow given his form, but also mainly because Jeffrey Schlupp is still out for another week or so. Lucia Mahovo still being built back up from the thigh injury that he suffered. He's back in training, but not quite ready to feature in matches yet. So the timing of both of those injuries means there are a lot of interesting decisions for Manning to make. And I'm interested to see what he does when that team news drops at 1:45 tomorrow. On to Wrexham then, and an interesting side. Obviously, they've had a lot of attention so far this season, given the Hollywood rise of the club, both from the National League and also with that finance that I think everyone's talking about quite a lot. But they're seeing similar struggles to Norwich. They made 13 senior signings in the summer transfer window. Norwich obviously made 12, and in the same way that Liam Manning's squad are kind of still gelling and still kind of trying to look like a team, I think Wrexham are finding some of those struggles. You'd say that they've bought players who are more ready for the Championship. They've bought a lot with experience in England already, as opposed to Norwich's more continental approach. But you still need those interpersonal relationships to come together and for the team to kind of to improve in that sense. So it has been a real test of Phil Parkinson's tactical ability, but what he's gone for so far in terms of the way they set up is a sort of 3-5-2 with Ryan Hardy and Kiefer Moore up front, Connor Cody, the kind of experienced one at the back, alongside Callum Doyle, who of course Norwich fans know very well, and probably the key thing when you look at those defenders to highlight, and some of the wing backs as well. James McLean obviously getting on a little bit in footballing terms on the left hand side, is that there are kind of pace weaknesses to exploit for Norwich. I think what will be key for them is trying to get balls in behind for Josh Sargent, who has much more pace than Connor Cody, much more pace than Callum Doyle, as Norwich fans saw, was kind of his fatal flaw really in yellow and green last season. And I think he'll be able to get in behind time and again, as actually we saw from Richard Kone for QPR when they beat Wrexham 3-1, and their kind of approach of getting plenty of balls in behind was vital in their 3-1 win last weekend. But you have to do that with precision, because if you just start whacking drifted long balls forward without any pace, then actually those are the sorts of balls that defenders like Cody and Doyle really thrive on, because they're excellent in the air. They're happy to get into a tussle and be part of that physical battle. So you need to find positions to play through balls rather than just lumping it long and expecting to create chances that way. I think Norwich have tried that at various times this season, and we know Manning is looking for that variety as opposed to Johannes Torup's more structured approach, where he expected the team to play out on a near constant basis. But it hasn't really worked especially well for them so far when they've just lumped it long. So I think they need to find the midfielders in good positions. They need to probably find Kenny McLean in a position to play balls through for Josh Sargent. I think Mirko Topic has many strengths and has shown them for Norwich so far, but maybe struggles with that final pass. And I would say that might be a slight weakness of Norwich's more mechanical midfield duo at the moment, is you don't have as much of a natural ball player to play that final pass. And maybe that's where someone like Emi Marcondes comes in to add that little extra creativity and quality. And that's where probably those number 10 positions could work really well for Norwich, if they can just kind of get their players used to them and work out where they fit in the tactical system. So I think for me, it would be getting balls into Kenny McLean and Emi Marcondes so that they can play those passes. And also I think Norwich need to come out of the blocks quickly, because you add that home record and sort of the way that Wrexham will play, you get the sense that the players and the fans might get a little bit frustrated if it gets to sort of 50, 60 minutes and Norwich aren't showing signs of the breakthrough and it's still deadlocked. That's when maybe either the frustration will set in, and that could have different effects. One of them could be that Norwich actually push too hard and Wrexham go and nick a goal at the other end. So I think it's really important that they can get out of the blocks quickly and take an early lead if possible, which obviously is easy to say, and you'd like an early lead in every game. But I think it's especially important in this one in terms of how they'll have to defend against Wrexham. As I was saying, it's quite direct, so it's often Kiefer Moore knocking it on, and then either players picking up the knock-ons, picking up the second balls behind him, or running on to get flick-ons or to receive through balls after that ball's been knocked down. Ryan Hardy, as Norwich have seen to devastating effect when he was with Plymouth, can finish really well, can get into those positions and find space. So Norwich will first of all need to battle really well with Kiefer Moore, and you'd say that with Jakov Medic and Harry Darling, they've got two players who can do that, but then they need to react to the second balls really well as well. And that might also help with Jose Cordoba if he is involved, because he's probably the best defender they've got at sweeping in behind. He's got a lot of pace, and he that comes naturally to him. Obviously Vladan Kovacevic has a role to play there as well, and I actually thought against Coventry, although his saves will take a lot of the attention, I thought his sweeping up at the back was really important and really high quality as well. So you need all of those qualities. You need the battling and the physicality, but ultimately if Norwich can find control of the game, then and the opportunities to play those through balls that Wrexham have struggled against so far this season, then I think there is the opportunity there for them to get a good result, and a result that Liam Manning has said they're desperate for after their early struggles at home. Of course, we'll have every kick of the game covered across our channels, so go to pinkun.com/subscribe if you haven't already, and you'll have access to all of that coverage. Thank you very much for joining me on Tactics Board, and I'll see you for the next one.